Good evening. I am Professor Anne-Geneviève Marcelin, and I'm virologist in Paris. And I will speak today about an update on SARS-CoV-2 virological diagnostics. Here are my disclosures. So during this presentation, I will address 3 points. First, the current recommendation for diagnosis and some alternatives. What diagnostics are useful in tracking variants, and then when should we use antibody and cell-mediated immunity diagnostics, and how useful are they? This presentation will be mainly general, and I'm sure that some specific points will be addressed by my colleagues in the next presentations. So what types of tests do we have for SARS-CoV-2? We have nucleic acid assays that detect the presence of viral RNA, and they indicate infection. And this is currently the gold standard for diagnosis. We have also antigen assays. These are immunoassays that detect the presence of viral antigens, and they're also indicating infection. And then we have antibody assays, and they detect IgM and IgG antibodies against the virus, indicating past infection. They are useful for COVID-19 surveillance, identification of convalescent plasma donors, and also to determine correlates of protection. So if we compare the most common diagnostic methods, nucleic acid amplification test versus antigenic testing. As you can see, the NAT assays can be run on different specific types, specimen types, nasal, nasopharyngeal, sputum, saliva. There are generally a high sensitivity and a high specificity. Their complexity can vary, and some of them are authorized as a point of care. They have a turnaround time of between 15 minutes and 2 days, and their cost is generally moderate. So this is a primary method for COVID-19 diagnostics, and with multiple RT-PCR kits that are available. And SARS-CoV-2 RNA is generally undetectable by day 14 after onset of illness in this case. For antigen test, then can be run on the nasal and nasopharyngeal specimen. Their sensitivity is generally moderate with a high specificity. They are very easy to use, and most of these tests are authorized at point of care test. They have a rapid turnaround time. Their cost is low, and there are a reduced sensitivity versus PCR tests that may result in false negative. We have to keep in mind the timing of PCR and antigen tests. Indeed, both RNA and antigen are detectable before symptom onset here. However, antigen declines quickly after symptom onset, but RNA is detectable for weeks. So antigen tests should be used as soon as possible after the symptom onset for a diagnosis. Beyond this information about a positive or negative test, the RT-PCR test can provide additional information. And for example, in this study, this is a study in French COVID-19 patients, and the objective was to make a modelization of the viral kinetics of SARS-CoV-2. And they showed that after 7 or 14 days post-symptom onset, high levels of viral load were significantly associated with mortality. They showed that the predicted median time to viral clearance was 13 days for patients below 65 years and 16 days for patients above 65 years after symptom onset. And other studies showed that For example, immunosuppression also was another factor associated with prolonged PCR positivity. And regarding the variants, the RT-PCR shows also some information. We published recently this paper showing that there are some differences of viral load between the variants. Indeed, as you can see here, the UK variants at the time of diagnosis for COVID-19 patients, viral load 3 to 10 times higher than the historical variants. And for the South African variants, it was intermediate with a viral load twice than the historical variants in the nasopharyngeal swabs from newly diagnosed COVID-19 patients. So these information are important because they can explain why, for example, in France, the UK variants became dominant in comparison to the South African variant during the same period. Now, if you look at the antigen test, there was a systematic review from the Cochrane database on rapid point-of-care antigen and molecular-based tests for diagnostics of SARS-CoV-2 infection. And regarding antigen test, they evaluate the sensitivities and the specificity of this test in symptomatic patients with a sensitivity of 72%, 78% in symptomatic patients up to 7 days from onset of symptoms, and a lower sensitivity in asymptomatic patients at 58%. And generally, the specificity was high at 99%. So in countries where the prevalence is low, with the positive rapid test results may require confirmatory testing to avoid unnecessary quarantine measures. Indeed, the positive predictive values are around 85 to 90% for antigen assays mean that between 1 in 10 and 1 in 7 positive results will be falsely negative. On the opposite, where the prevalence is higher, we can have false positives are less of a concern, but the impact from false negative results become increasingly important, and all test negatives may be considered for verification. So in conclusion, for NAT versus antigen testing, rapid SARS-CoV-2 antigen tests are very attractive because of their low complexity, turnaround on time, low cost. However, they have overall a sensitivity of 80% in symptomatic individuals and 50 to 60% in asymptomatic, in comparison to the standard NAT as comparator. So given this low sensitivity of antigen test, standard NAT remains a diagnostic modality of choice for detecting SARS-CoV-2 infection. However, in situations where standard NAT is not available or not feasible, antigen testing could be used without the need to routinely confirm positive test results with the NAT. And you have to keep in mind that a negative antigen test does not rule out SARS-CoV-2 infection or infectivity and should be confirmed by a standard test for patients with signs or symptoms of COVID-19. There is a need and increasing research about alternative samples. Indeed, saliva is very attractive because very easy to collect. And this study conducted in the United States showed that in 70 hospital inpatients who had a diagnosis of COVID-19, they collected nasopharyngeal and self-collected saliva. And in this study, you can see that there were more SARS-CoV-2 RNA copies in the saliva specimen than in the nasopharyngeal swabs specimens. And in addition, there was a higher percentage of saliva samples than nasopharyngeal swab samples up to 10 days after the COVID-19 diagnosis. So the conclusion of this study was that saliva specimens and nasopharyngeal swabs had at least similar sensitivity in the detection of SARS-CoV-2 during the course of hospitalization. In these studies, they also collected saliva in healthcare workers, and they had very few saliva positive. However, among these 13 saliva positive, seven were tested in comparison in the nasopharyngeal swabs. So given the growing need for testing, this finding provides support for the potential of saliva specimen in the diagnosis of SARS-CoV-2 infection. And recently, there was a systematic review and meta-analysis on the performance of saliva, oropharyngeal swabs, and nasal swabs for SARS-CoV-2 molecular detection. And this study showed that 3 specimen types capture lower percentage of positives, with a nasal specimen with 82%, oropharyngeal 84%, and saliva 88% versus nasopharyngeal. So there is a lower sensitivity, but that remains quite good. So in conclusion, in some study, the saliva showed a similar performance versus nasopharyngeal swabs. So it could be interesting for example, for iterative screening in healthcare workers, but also in mass screening. However, in these studies, we need more clarity about exact details of collection procedures, specific swab shape and material used. For example, if there are any dilution, what type of extraction, storage, transport, etc. Because for saliva, there are many protocols, and it's very difficult to compare studies versus other. So we really need head-to-head comparison studies to conclude on the interest of and the usefulness of saliva specimen. And there are also some other type of diagnostics. And for example, this is a French study evaluating the screening of technique for COVID-19 using the olfactory capacity of dogs. And as you can see in this study, it was a comparison between RT-PCR and canine olfactory test. And this study showed a preliminary result, very interesting, with a sensitivity of the canine olfactory test about 97% and a specificity of 91% versus nasopharyngeal RT-PCR test. So now if we look at the impact of SARS-CoV-2 variants on COVID-19 diagnostics. As you know, there was an expansion of the SARS-CoV-2 variant from summer 2020, and then an expansion during the autumn with the emergence of several variants of concerns, such as the UK, the South African, the Brazilian, and the Indian variants. We know that this emergence of variants can have an impact of diagnostics. And for example, with the Thermo Fisher RT-PCR that have 3 viral targets in ORF, ACE, and N region, you can see that the S probe is not matching for the alpha or UK variant because of the deletion 6970 in the spike protein. And if we look at the amplification curves, you can see that this is a positive sample for all the 3 targets, S, N, and ORF. And here you can see the positive sample with the UK variant with only 2 positive targets and the S negative. So this is clearly a profile of UK variant positive with the Thermo Fisher test. On this slide, you have the different mutation associated with the different variants. For example, you can see that for the UK variant, this is the deletion I showed you in the previous slide in association with the mutation in the spike protein at the 501 position. And as you can see, other variants, the gamma and beta variants, have also 484 mutations in combination with the 501. So we know that some variants have specific mutations, and some labs have implemented some variant of consent PCR with specific mutations, with some SNP detections to identify very rapidly the different variants after a positive test. So this is based on probes and fusion curves to detect these SNPs, and we can detect some specific mutations, the 501, the 484, and now the 452 mutation for the Indian variant. The interest is that you can have a result in 36 hours from the first positive test. And this can be interesting for a rapid VOX screening, for example, to adapt the contact tracing if you identify a new variant, or for example, also if you want to use of monoclonal antibodies, because some of these variants are not susceptible to some monoclonal antibodies, especially those carrying the 484 mutations. However, there are some limits because this strategy is giving only partial information. It could be sometimes difficult to interpret this test. And if there are a new variant with a new mutation, you have to adapt your strategy and to design a new PCR. So what are the diagnostics that are useful in tracking variants? So I showed you the strategy of the VOC screening PCR. That is interesting because you can perform that in real time, but with limited interpretation. You can make spike Sanger sequencing to determine the S located in the mutation located in the S region. So this could be interesting for rapid confirmation, but it's difficult to have a real determination of the lineage of the virus. And of course, the gold standard is the full genome sequencing that can give a very specific variant characterization and identification also of new variants. And to finish, I would like to say a few words about the antibodies. This is a study that you can see in Medrca showing that anti-SARS-CoV-2 antibodies can persist for up to 13 months in healthcare workers here in this study. And it's very interesting because for anti-S antibody, there is a stabilization of anti-S with 97% of healthcare workers who are still positive at months 11 or 13. However, there is a strong decrease of the anti-N antibodies over time, with only 20% of healthcare workers who are still positive after months 11, 13. And this can have some implication for the vaccination, because if we look at the antibody response in seropositive persons after a single dose of SARS-CoV-2 mRNA vaccines, as you can see on this slide, a single dose of mRNA vaccine can elicit a rapid immune response in already seropositive participants with post-vaccination antibodies titers that are similar or sometimes can exceed it here, titers found in seronegative participants who received 2 vaccinations. So this suggests that probably a pre-vaccination serology could be useful to identify seropositive individuals who need only 1 dose of vaccine to get a good immune response after vaccination. However, there are some specific populations where the vaccine response is not very good. And for example, in the transplant recipients, we showed that as other teams, that among solid organ transplant recipients without previous COVID-19 infections, that there was a very low anti-SPAC antibody response, around 28% after 2 doses of mRNA vaccines. In this study, we observed 4 severe cases after the 2 doses, and we identified some factors that were associated with a low antibody response after vaccination, such as kidney transplantation, time from transplantation for the first injection below 2 years, and also diabetes. However, some recent study that evaluated the T-cell response in this population of solid organ transplantation showed that even in patients with no antibody response, you can detect a T-cell response by an ELISpot test, evaluating the production of gamma interferon after the stimulation of the cells with a pool of peptides from nucleocapsid or S protein. Indeed, in this study, in the 117 COVID-19 naive patients, 65% of patients developed either a humoral or cellular response, and half of antibody negative patients had actually developed a positive ELISpot. So this finding highlights that patients may be actually protected against SARS-CoV-2 despite the absence of antibodies. So we have to learn more about this T-cell response after vaccinations and to better define correlates of protection. So in conclusion, for diagnostics, RT-PCR is a recommended test for diagnosis of COVID-19 in nasopharyngeal swabs. There is still a need for alternative tests for antigen testing, RT-LAMP, but also alternative samples such as saliva. And we have to keep in mind that there is a difference between diagnostics and large-scale screening, and we have plenty of tests now, and some of them are less sensitive, but if they are more convenient and rapid, they could be useful, and we have to use in a complementary strategy these tests. Regarding the emergence of variants, I showed you different strategy for rapid screening of this variant of concern by PCR. However, the gold standard to study the emergence of variants remain the NGS method. And finally, for the use of antibody and cell-mediated immunity testing, of course, seroepidemiologic studies are useful to evaluate the circulation of the virus and herd immunity. But I think we have to continue all the work on to better define the vaccine strategy with the use, for example, of pre-test to know if patients need 1 or 2 doses of vaccine, and also to better determine the correlates of protections, especially in specific populations. Thank you for your attention, and I will be pleased to answer to your question after this presentation.